Hello and welcome to the Championship Lowdown podcast. I am joined for the first time in a while back with Lewis on the channel. Welcome back to the channel, Lewis.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
And we are back with another episode for you. So today will be a bit of a different one. We're going to mix and match sort of reviews from the midweek games. We'll highlight a couple of them and then we'll get on to previewing some of the games upcoming on the weekend. So without further ado, we're going to start. And as I said to you pre-recording, Lewis, we're going to go to Swansea to start. And it's not for me to complain too much.
Well, it's one of them where, like, every podcast that I've been on with you, you said the word Swansea, and then you've just went into some sort of, I don't know, some sort of trance of disappointment. But you've got a smile on your face.
I know. Ollie said he wants to see me with a smile on the face. Well, if you're watching this one, mate, you finally got your wish. Swansea 1, Portsmouth 0. Back-to-back wins for the Swans as well, after beating Oxford in two very big games for our season, if I'm being brutally honest, which it really shouldn't be considering our aims pre-season, but there we are, it is. 1-0 win for us, thanks to a Liam Cullen worldie again. I think someone tweeted the Swansea only score screamers because it seems to be our goal catalogue is a bit ridiculous at the minute. Cullen with an absolute screamer off the bench into the top left corner, which sealed another big 3 points for us. So I suppose I should start. And I'm happier than I have been, safe to say, in basically the entire season in the last 4 days even. We were much better. I think for us it was the bare minimums. They didn't look too bad. They just looked half-assed, I think, when we were playing. There was points in time we were like, do they even care? Now under Matos, obviously we had a shaky first two games, obviously losing both of them in quite, negative fashions, but we come back, we bounce back with, what is a big win at Oxford and a convincing win as well, with another screamer in that one with Josh Tyman arguably scoring goal of the season on the volley from the edge of the box. And then obviously beating Portsmouth as well. So, I think I sort of said, as long as we win these games, I don't really mind how we do it, as long as we do it. It's sort of just these ones get out of the way, win them. And then obviously we have a tougher run coming up, which we'll speak about later in the episode. But yeah, I mean, I think there's not so much to complain about. I think we're a bit slow in the first half to get going. We still have that sort of issue with creating chances. I think we're still struggling to get there fully, which obviously, hopefully will come with time under Matos. It seems to be clicking more and more every week. So fingers crossed that will continue. But obviously, I'm going to have the biased perspective. So I'll let you have a word on the less Swansea leading perspective on this one.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, not to sort of like bring your world crashing down and sort of, I don't know, speak ill of a Swansea win. You only get them once every blue moon at the moment. But obviously, it's came against a Portsmouth side, which are going under the radar a little bit as a team, just significantly struggling as of late. They've just not managed to, they've just struggled in every single game in Championship level. Like 1 win in 10, and to, as I said, fall to a defeat against the Swansea side, which has its own struggles. You've documented that very clearly in recent weeks. And yeah, it doesn't really send a good message ahead of upcoming games. It's now 3 games without a goal. Sorry. And we just really lack that attacking edge up front. It comes down to quality in the side, I feel like. We don't really have that abundance of Championship quality. And I think after such a good season last year when they managed to stay up, I feel like that's really, really obvious now. And that second season syndrome sort of coming into play a little bit. They've not been brilliant across all fronts, really.
No, I mean, I see your point. If you look through their front four last night, so obviously Mignot, Yang, Connor Chaplin, always forget which Murphy it is. It's Josh Murphy on Portsmouth, and Callum Lang. There's only 2 goals in that entire front four this season, and they're both from Yang on the wing. So, it's not great at all. You got your striker and, Connor Chaplin, who is sort of a false 9, sort of more than an attacking midfielder. No goals between them. It's not great. I mean, I didn't really feel under pressure. For us, with our run we've been on, we lost 5-6 games in a row. We didn't really feel any attacking threat from Portsmouth at all, really. I can't remember them having all too many chances in this game to come back into it. I can't even think of a big chance they had in the game. So it's definitely concerning for them. As you said, I think I've highlighted enough on this podcast how bad we've been in the last couple of weeks. So it's certainly not a game you want to lose, because obviously now that opens the gap for us as well, because we're now 6 points clear of Portsmouth, and we went in to this sort of slate of fixtures on last Saturday on the same points as them. So, we've pulled that gap just in 2 games. Huge gap to pull in just 2 games. So I'm happy because we're out of trouble for now. I don't think it's over because obviously, as I sort of aforementioned there, we've got a very tough run of games coming up, especially in our next 3. They don't look great. So, not to say that we're going to stay this far clear. We're just going to fly up the table and going to get into the playoffs and we're going to win everything. I'm not doing that whole dramatic end of the spectrum. It's very much a concern. We're still yet to beat a good team is my big thing. We're still yet to beat a team. I believe every team we've beaten this season has at some point sat in the relegation zone. So that's a concern. Obviously, going to Stoke on Saturday as well, it'll be a big challenge. But yeah, as you said, Portsmouth certainly got issues in that attacking front.
Yeah, I mean, one name that you highlighted before, Connor Chaplin, he came through as one of the bigger signings this summer. There was a lot of anticipation that he'd be able to hit the heights, but he, like many others, has just been very disappointing. And I feel like we need to highlight Chaplin just because he's got that name, he's got that championship pedigree, he's done it at this level time and time again. But he's went to Pompey and he's just not been able to supply them with any help going forwards. Obviously, Colby Bishop struggled in terms of goal scoring as well, not had much impact. But with what we've seen from Chaplin over the years, you'd think he'd be able to replicate it to a certain extent. But it doesn't seem to be a shining light at all for Portsmouth at the moment.
No, it's pretty gloomy for them as well. As you said, with their run with no goals in 3. As I said, if you can't really create much of a chance against us with the form that we've been in, you've got issues to not even trouble us because we've conceded a lot. We had the most goals conceded in November. So, to not score a goal against a team that for us, it's mental because we conceded the most amount of goals in November and we're yet to concede in December. I'm sure that'll change with teams like Coventry coming up on the schedule, but we've played 2 games and we haven't conceded a goal. So that's a good sign for us, I suppose, in a way as well, that we're not conceded after having an absolutely disastrous November. It's safe to say. I think we lost every game in the league and conceded a fair whack of goals. So as well for Pompey, they got some big games coming up, especially, on Saturday against Blackburn. It's another big game for them in terms of a team that will be in and around that bottom place with them, but we'll see how that one pans out. We will move on, though, to Southampton, who came away with a result I'm very unfortunately familiar with, a 3-2 win, which wasn't for... we obviously lost to West Brom 3-2. Southampton come through and they win 3-2, another big win for Todd Eckert. I believe this was his first or second game since they'd announced him as the permanent head coach.
Maybe second, essentially, yeah.
I think second, right, yeah. I remember they won both of them, put it that way. I think I mentioned it to Ollie Lewis on one of our podcasts after the Millwall defeat. I sort of said, how do you come out and respond? I feel like I said I personally would have waited to give Beckett the job until you see how they responded to a defeat, because obviously they hadn't lost under him up until that point. But 2 wins with 6 goals scored, I think that's more than enough to prove that he deserves the job for now.
I mean, they're really turning up the style in the recent weeks, aren't they? I think one prediction that I'm going to make right now, and I think it'll hold in good stead till the end of the season, both Southampton and Sheffield United will make that top 6. I'm so sure of it now, especially Southampton, who, I mean, Adam Armstrong, for example, his ability in the Championship's it's been well known for a while, but the way he's just been able to turn it up a notch in recent weeks has just been absolutely life-changing for Saints. And yeah, there seems to be no way of that slowing down whatsoever. As for West Brom's side, it's just, again, there's a lot of doom and gloom in the Championship with certain sides, but West Brom in particular, there's not much to shout about whatsoever. I feel like Ryan Mason, I've got a little bit of sympathy for him. Obviously, I'm Hull City fans. We've got that allegiance of when he was a player with us, but it just doesn't seem to be going right whatsoever. He's a sort of coach that you need to have in play for a long-term plan. And I'm sure West Brom's hierarchy do have that, but they've got to be scratching their heads at this moment and thinking, is he going to turn it around? When's he going to turn it around? We've got Sheffield United and Hull City as their next 2 games, 2 sides which, especially the Blades, are banging form. It's been a very challenging season so far for them. But yeah, as I say, Southampton, it seems like no one can stop them at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we thought after Millwall, I sort of said, I was like, okay, we'll wait to see how you respond to a loss, because obviously that's a big thing for a new manager, is how you respond to that first loss, and they've done so brilliantly, beating, a Birmingham side who are in fine run of form comfortably, and West Brom. And I think, as you mentioned it, but Adam Armstrong has been the catalyst sort of since Eckert took over. This was a man who couldn't score for love nor money. I think when I went to St Mary's earlier in the season, he looked lost. he was having an absolute mare in front of goal, couldn't find anything, and then all of a sudden, since Eckert's come in and took over, there's been one game where he's not had a goal contribution. One. I mean, he's on absolute fire. So, this is what we expect. He's got 4 goals in his last 2 games. This is the Adam Armstrong we expected, the 20-goal-a-season striker of the Championship, not the one that we saw in the opening sort of few months under Will Still. So, he's been a catalyst for them and them turning this form around. But as far as West Brom goes, you said with Mason, you look at the last 5, they're only winners against us. And obviously in the situation we were in at the time, it's not great because you're also 2-0 down in that game and had to, really, shift the boat out to get the win in the first place. So there are concerns, as you said, you've got to be patient with managers like this, first real job in terms of a long-term, full-time stint for Mason. So, you've got to be patient. I say the one positive I can take for West Brom at the minute is Hegebo, especially in his recent form. He's been superb. I believe he didn't score in the Southampton game, but obviously before that he's been in a really good run of form, and it's sort of been the saving grace of their sort of last couple of weeks with the goals that he's managed to put up. Scored 3 in his last 3 games. So, he's on a better run of form. But apart from that, as you said, 16th in the league. They're only 2 points above Sheffield United and Swansea, who, we've both been right down the bottom for a lot of this season. So it starts to ring alarm bells, especially when you're only 8 points clear of the drop. It really starts to ring alarm bells where if this doesn't turn around quickly, as much as you have to have patience, Lewis, with the situation, there's patience and then there's risks they can't take.
Yeah, and it's... Again, you mentioned there that they've got, a few stand-up players. Hegebo's obviously shown a little bit of quality, but you look at the players within their ranks. No, Nathaniel Phillips, Chris Metham, Championship standard players, and it's just something just doesn't seem to be clicking. It's difficult to put your finger on what's actually going wrong with West Brom because they're shipping plenty of goals. That's very evident. Obviously, we've conceded 3 against QPR. Conceded 3 against Southampton, conceded 2 in that win against Swansea. It's just no massive issues in terms of in front of goal, but yeah, you can't be shipping 3 goals, 2 goals here and there and expecting to be in the top half of the league. I think that's just a fact.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's issues there and they have to be mended because as much as you need to have patience with the project, you've also got to be very careful that you don't slip into a problem with a relegation fight. For example, like Norwich have sort of slipped into that sort of disaster situation which they didn't want to be in. So, you've got to be careful. But I think they'll be okay. They need to sort of just find some confidence in this team. It was sort of like I said with Swansea a few weeks ago, which needs some confidence. With 2 wins, you get that. Whereas West Brom, you get the win against Swansea, obviously. You think that spurred them on, a 2-0 down, come back 3-2, last sort of 85th minute goal. That's sort of the perfect win if you want some confidence to get a comeback like that. But hasn't really shown in the games after. Obviously, they've lost the 2 games after it. So, as you said, Sheffield United, Hull, and there's the next 2 as well. It's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that form up going forward. But speaking of Hull, that's where we'll go to next. Obviously, I think it's a sort of a surprise result, maybe. I don't know, because obviously Wrexham seemed to be formidable in November, didn't only conceded 1 goal, and that came in the last game. And they're on a little unbeaten run, which has finally come to an end at the hands of your Hull City. Lewis, 2-0 win, thanks to Carl Joseph and Ollie McBurney. With the goals, obviously McBurney being back is huge as well as we knew this it would be for you coming off the bench to get the goal as well. But I believe you've lost, as soon as you sort of get everyone back, I believe you've now lost Joe Gelhardt, the second McBurney comes back into the squad. So it must be so frustrating as a Hull City fan this sort of year with the injuries that you've had to deal with.
Yeah, it's been... I'll be honest, all Hull fans will agree with me saying this, but we're just numb to injury problems now. We've had to suffer so much over recent years. Bellumi out for a year. Then Liam Miller was out for a year with his own ACL problems. McBurney's been in and out. Gelhardt's now out now. The only saving grace is the fact that McBurney seems to have come back at the perfect time to take over. And he's exactly what Hull have been crying out for, to be honest. That Ollie McBurney and Ryan Giles combination, what did it take? 4-5 minutes to come back into play? Ryan Giles just putting it on a plate. And I think it was Domham who slid across for Wrexham. He just couldn't manage to get on the end of it. And then McBurney's there just to slot it home. I mean, they make it look easy, them too. It's just absolutely ridiculous football. But the fact, with McBurney, one thing that isn't really highlighted too often is he's not just got that, that goal-scoring impact, able to come off the bench and still, bag a goal. it's his defensive contributions as well. When he's playing, he always, seems to drop back for like set pieces, or when Hull are up against a Kosh, which is quite often, to be honest. And he just adds that bit more of assurance at the back, as well as Charlie Hughes, who was back as well, and that's obviously massive for Hull. But yeah, crucial for Ollie McBurney to come back, and as we saw against Wrexham, massively paid off in return from injury as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ollie said it every week. There's a new injury every week, it seems, with Hull. I'm learning about players getting injured, I didn't even realise they'd been injured. But losing Gelhart's big, because obviously, as much as it's not detrimental, because in a way he was just filling a gap with McBurney, you'd like to have both of them in that team, I assume, with Gelhart probably out wide, and then, you have McBurney up front as your sort of your poacher, your goal scorer. But so it's not ideal. But, you get a big win here against Wrexham. This is a team that, conceded 1 goal, as I said, in the month of November, absolutely formidable in the last couple of weeks. And, we also, I think a lot of people predicted, I think even, Ollie and yourself, I can't remember what you said, but I know Ollie predicted a loss in this one. So, certainly a happy sort of shock result, I guess you want to call it, because obviously didn't expect it. But yeah, as far as Wrexham, I don't know. Again, they've been so good in the last couple of weeks. You're sung their praises. You've got to be like today in that game. They weren't great. It was a dominant whole performance, really. Obviously, you've got to look to Kiefer Moore. I believe he missed not only a sitter, but also a penalty in this game. So, there's chances. You can't argue with the chances they had. 2 big chances in the game. They don't score either of them. That's your 2 goals, and that's your point at least away at Hull, which would be no mean feat at all, where you are in the league, obviously 6th in the playoffs. It's the Wrexham team who've been climbing. So it's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like obviously, you know a lot more about me, but with Hull, it seems to just be vastly inconsistent at the minute. You've got only 2 wins in your last 5. Obviously, they come against Stoke and Wrexham, who are 2 very good sides. So I have no idea how to be one of them teams. I just can't call at the minute.
It's one of the way. Obviously, you started the second segment by saying a surprise result for Hull. I don't think any result is a surprise for Hull at this point. We'll beat a team up there fighting for the title or for the playoffs, and then we'll come up against a team battling for relegation and we'll lose 3-0. I feel like we're just so inconsistent, and it stuns me how high up in the table we actually are after what has been quite a few difficult results as well. But yeah, obviously the Gelhardt injury is far from ideal, but on the positive side, Liam Miller's getting more minutes. Bellumi got his 2nd start of the entire season. I believe his 1st start was when he got his injury again, hamstring injury, and he looked very lively. Bit of a jiggery pokery, managed to get the ball through Wrexham defenders' legs, which love to see, obviously. But to give Wrexham a single positive on what was a pretty bleak evening for them, obviously Phil Parkinson was watching from the stands. He had a suspension for that game, and he wouldn't have liked what he was seeing, but he definitely would have been a fan of Nathan Broadhead against Hull. He was one of the few players who really looked like he was going to cause chaos. And of course, it was him who drew in the foul from Matt Crooks to win that. The penalty, obviously, was then not converted by Kiefer Moore, which he had a very shocking game, if we're being honest. That, as well as the other missed chance in the first half. But yeah, Nathan Broadhead was lively. He looked like a real threat, and unfortunately, his Wrexham teammates let him down to an extent to not really, capitalise on what was a positive individual performance from him.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see it develops for Wrexham. Obviously, it can be tough to come back from a loss like that after such a good run of form. As we said, it's how you respond to the losses after a long run of not losing. But for Hull, obviously, as you said, I can't call it. They're 6th in the league, so fair play. They're doing very well. All things considered, with all the problems that you've had, more already off the pitch with the injuries than you have sort of performance-wise on the pitch. So hopefully, you can get some players fit. And actually, I don't know if we'll see a full Hull team this entire season, to be honest, because it seems to be when you have one back, you lose the other one. So we will see how that.
In about 5 years, I'll be honest.
We'll see how that one goes. But we will move on to our preview section of the episode. So now, obviously, we'll highlight a few games for the upcoming Saturday slate of fixtures and see what we think is going to happen. And we will start with Norwich versus Southampton on the early kickoff. Obviously, this is a Norwich side which has had their fair share of struggles, it's safe to say. But, they've not been too bad since Philippe Clement come in. Only lost 2 games since he started his tenure. Obviously, one being at St Andrews, which is forgivable. And obviously, a tough loss away at Watford. But, a draw home to Oxford, which they probably should have won. Beating QPR comfortably, which is obviously a good result considering the form that they've been on as of late. And then, a valuable point away at Bramall Lane, all things considered. So not in a bad situation. Obviously, we sort of just spoke about Southampton and everything you need to know about them. So what do we think for this one, Lewis?
I mean, yeah, that point against Sheffield United could be really big. Just for to get a bit of momentum going, just for the morale of the players. It's obviously been a really tough place to go in recent weeks. Sheffield United have been one of the most informed sides in the Championship. And yeah, there's been positives with Norwich since the new boss took over, but you've just got to think they really need to start putting it into some results. We're still, looming towards the bottom of the Championship table, and defensively, they have struggled. They've been very good in front of goal, but defensively, not perfect. And that this Southampton team will definitely exploit any defensive shortcomings. We mentioned Adam Armstrong before. We've got Finn Azars. We've got a bunch of, great attacking quality. And I feel like Norwich really need to shore up the defence. Otherwise, could be quite a difficult early afternoon for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we say Southampton as well. Even that loss against Millwall, they're scoring a lot of goals since Eckert took over. It's quick football, it's attacking, it's creative football, and it's paying off in dividends, really. And they've been on, that response is perfect to the original defeat against Millwall. They come back with 2 big wins. So, as you said, with the Norwich side with shortcomings in defence, I'm going to struggle to see how they stop this Southampton side from scoring goals. I struggle to see how many teams in this league stop the Southampton side from scoring goals with the form like they're in front of goal at the minute. But yeah, I don't think Norwich have been too bad. They've been better, but obviously, you have to look at the league table when all this boils down to it. I think they're 5 points adrift now of Oxford and 21st. So the gap is getting bigger with these teams picking up points. Obviously, you've got teams like Blackburn above that, Charlton as well, with games in hand due to what circumstances as well. So I think with Norwich, the results have to come and they have to come quickly. You've got to be careful. You can't get cut adrift in this division because you will not be able to claw it back. But, it's Southampton, Preston, Charlton. Charlton will be a huge game for them. Obviously, a team that's fallen down the table, in dramatic style as well after their start of the year. That's a game they need to win. Obviously, Preston away is going to be a tough test as well with them in the playoff positions in Southampton. So I'll be intrigued to see if they can stop this Southampton side because I really can't see it personally. I think this Southampton side, in the form that they're in, I would back very few teams against them, and I can't really back technically the worst team in the league, bar Sheffield Wednesday on -9. I think it's difficult, Lewis, to see this game going in any other direction than what probably most people expect.
I think one thing we definitely can guarantee from this game, as we mentioned on the defensive issues that Norwich and Southampton to an extent have had. They've only had 1 clean sheet in the last 10 games, I believe. There's going to be goals. It's going to be an absolute goal fest, I feel like, this one. And whether that'll swing in the way of Southampton and Norwich, I feel like Southampton at home have looked very good. I think having that home form in mind is also very important. And I think, Norwich, it could be a difficult day for them.
Safe to say I'm happy that we played Southampton at St Mary's before Thunder Eckert took over because I would not want to face them there now. I think you're right. I think it'll be a high scoring game. I just think Southampton have been so good, and that response from the loss has sold me on Thunder Eckert now. I think that's the sort of pivotal thing was can he get this team to bounce back and keep that confidence flowing, and he absolutely has. So this could be a big win for Southampton, and it could really dent the confidence of a Norwich side who are sort of clawing themselves back into a bit more of an acceptable run of form as of late. It could be a big hit for them if they were to get knocked for 4 or 5 goals in this one for Southampton. I think if it's going to sway towards anyone in terms of a high-scoring game, I think you look more towards Southampton than you do to Norwich in this one. But we'll move on back to Swansea again. And I mean, this one I'm a bit more concerned about because it's actually against the good teams. You've got to tread lightly on this one, but. It is Swansea away at Stoke. I am unfortunately going at like 7 o'clock in the morning for some stupid reason. To see this one, obviously, Swansea off our 2 wins in a row are finally ending our horrendous run of losses. Stoke on a very bad run. 4 losses in the last 5. Their only win coming against a very sort of disaster-struck Charlton at the minute, with them toppling down the table. For Stoke in the form that they're in, obviously they came off their loss at Ipswich on the midweek games, and a 4-0 loss to Sheffield United on the weekend as well. So I don't want to be confident, Lewis, because with Swansea I tend not to get my hopes up because I just get let down very quickly. But I suppose if there's any, you look at it 2 ways. You either look at it as a chance to play a team in a bad run of form, but you also have this fear that they're going to be angry and they're going to want to put it right. So it's sort of, how do you view this one?
I mean, in terms of that, Mark Robins will get him riled up. He will not accept 4 defeats in a row for his team. I feel like this is a massive opportunity for Stoke to put an end to this, little drop in form that's gone recently. It's difficult with Stoke because we're still trying to work out if they're going to be a side who are going to be in the random playoffs towards the end of the season, or, they're just there for the time being, and it's a bit of a purple patch for them. I feel like this game will be really telling of where they actually are under Robins. And 3 defeats in a row obviously raises questions, but it would be very alarming if, 4 defeats in a row and that 4th comes, with all due respect, at home to Swansea, especially in the situation that Swansea are in as well. And it's a Swansea side, as you've mentioned, that not had too much luck in front of goal. And for a Stoke side, which, if you take into account the entire season, they've been very good defensively, but the last 3 games, it's not quite been the case. Obviously, we shipped goals for fun against Ipswich. Do you think Swansea could take advantage of that?
I'm sort of torn on this one because, as I said, you look at their form and you think that's probably the best time to face a team, when they're off it, they're struggling, because you can pile on their lack of confidence, the lack of form, and make it worse. However, as I said, you have the counterpoint, which is they'll be riled up. They don't want to lose 4 games in a row. They want to stay in touch with the playoff positions, which they need a win to do. So it's difficult. I think, look, we've been much better. I still have concerns, especially on the attacking front of things. I think, obviously, defensively, I think it goes under the radar how huge it is for us to get 2 clean sheets in that game against, Oxford and Pompey. That's huge for our defence that has been leaking goals for fun in November, as I already mentioned. So I think, as you said, a win would be lovely. It puts us right back in the mix in the middle of the league. We could climb as high as 16th, I believe. So, it's right back in the middle again, which is where we want to be for now. And then also you want to be looking more up than down, which is really, we just been looking down. There's a real fear of relegation with Sheehan at the helm. So under Matt, also, I think there's a bit more to us. There's a bit more of that passion, that sort of, and he's shown it in this sort of his interviews and the behind the scenes stuff that we post on our YouTube channels. He sort of comes as across that guy. He wants, he seems that he loves being here. He wants us to succeed and he wants to be the man to do it. So there's an opportunity here, 100%. I'm just concerned that this is still a good Stoke side. You have to bear that in mind, bar the results. This is a very good Stoke side. And I feel like, is it realistic to think they're going to lose 4 games in a row? I don't think so.
I think there will be, whilst all things considered, it's been a good season so far for Stoke. I think there will be a bit of pressure on Mark Robinson's shoulders. They could potentially, with a defeat or even with a draw, they could potentially drop into the bottom half. And for a side that 3, 4, 5 weeks ago was not only in the playoffs, but knocking on the doors of automatic promotion. Yes, it was very early doors, but it's been a massive turnaround, and not for all the good reasons since then. There will be pressure on Robbins, and I think they really need to turn it around, and this is their opportunity to do so.
Even a couple of weeks ago, they were knocking on the door of automatics, and it's all just come falling down for Stoke at the minute. Just not even in the playoffs anymore. As you said, could even fall into the bottom half. I've seen people say, it's just a Stoke side that looks like they've got no belief. They're lacking that sort of. I'm looking back. Their last 6 games, they've lost 5 of their last 6. Their only win coming at Charlton. I guess a difficult run. You look at it. They've played Coventry, Leicester, Hull, Sheffield United, and Ipswich, which fair enough. That is a very difficult run of games. But as a team who was where they were in the league and what you want to achieve, they're the games you simply have to win. You can't lose to the teams around you. That's how it goes at both ends of the table. You can't lose them games, and they are. So this is the opportunity. This is their first sort of, easier game. I'm not saying, we're no mugs at the minute. We're playing a lot better, but this is the first real chance with a half decent opponent that isn't flying. to get a result. But as I said, we're in a good run of form, so I'll back us obviously to the whatever. But I'm not entirely confident. I think we're going to struggle. This is tough. We have a horrible record against Stoke. It has to be said. We are awful against Stoke for some reason. Even dating back to the Prem days, I just remember that was always the team. You go in there, you go into the Bet365, and it's just going to be a nightmare. Luckily, for the last 2 seasons, I believe it's been on the Tuesday nights. It's the first time I actually get to go on Saturdays. That's great. But yeah, I think it's a big opportunity for Stoke, isn't it, to sort of turn that form around and get back into the swing of things. But I guess we'll find out come at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. But we now move into the latest slate of games, and our first one that we have chosen to speak about is probably the biggest game of the week. I want to say it's not the most entertaining sort of slate of games. We look to Leicester versus Ipswich. Obviously, we just mentioned Ipswich with their win over Stoke midweek on a very, very scary run of form, it has to be said. Obviously, bar that, shock loss to Oxford, they've been brilliant for a while now. That's their only loss since early September. So, that's a big, big run of form for Ipswich, who are now comfortably in 4th position and only 5 points off them automatic spots. So, a team that we thought might have been out of it for autos very much isn't out of it. Obviously, they had that big win against Coventry as well, which was sort of the big surprise, an absolute demolition job on what was comfortably the best team in the league up until that point. Looking at Leicester, it feels like every time we mention Marty Cifuentes on this pod and him being in trouble, he wins. We mentioned it on the pod, and he's won and draw since then. So certainly not under as much pressure as he was after the loss to Sheffield United. But they beat Derby away, draw to Bristol City away, back at the King Power. But are they going to have enough, Lewis, to take down what seems to be a basically formidable Ipswich side at the minute?
I mean, I'm not questioning if you've got access to my notes, because it literally says on mine, Mark Cifuentes comes close to the sack and then just picks up a result from nowhere. I mean, it's true, isn't it? The fact he's still in the job is fair play to him, to be fair play. I think he's still obviously far from safe, but if he can get a result at home against Ipswich, which isn't out of the question, I think he might start to, win the Leicester fans back on side, because I think he's had trouble doing that so far. But with Ipswich, it's going to be an uphill task no matter, who you've got. Because Ipswich, we've got Jaden Philogene, they've got all sorts of quality in that attacking front. They've got Jack Clark to turn to as well, whether he's coming on from off the bench or he's starting the game. There's just so much of an abundance of quality in that side. And yeah, Leicester at this moment, they're just similar to Hull, very inconsistent. You don't really know which Leicester side is going to turn up. And you'd think, they might have a bit of a home advantage, but the King Power has been a bit of a toxic place at the worst of times. And that has almost been a bit of an Achilles heel for Leicester and Cifuentes. So I feel like Ipswich need to get out the blocks fast from the front. And if they get an early goal, I feel like the fans do have a tendency to turn at Leicester. So it's all about getting that bright early start for Leicester or Ipswich, and whoever gets that first goal will be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I mean, look, they go to that Derby game. That's a Derby side on a fairly good run of form, all things considered. And, they get a big win there. Bristol City aren't exactly an easy team to beat either, and they get an okay result their way as well. 2 away games and you don't lose either of them. It's pretty impressive. So, he certainly saved himself probably to at least the new year now, you'd imagine, unless it all goes horribly wrong in the next couple of games. So it's an interesting one. It's hard to call with both these teams. I think Ipswich are on that run, which we expected them to be all year, but they finally hit them heights now. I think even as Coventry, with them battering them, you look over your shoulder. I know it's a 10-point gap, but it's certainly not done and all said and done for Coventry to win this division, in my opinion. I think Ipswich are a real threat to that first place spot. As far as Leicester go, I just can't call it, because as you said, every time we say Cifuentes is going, he's going to lose this game and he's going to be gone, they win, and then he stays for another 3 weeks. So I think Ipswich have been so good on the attacking front as well recently. I think obviously the Oxford game was a shock result, but apart from that, you can't really fault them too much in the other games that they've played. Against the last 2 wins against Coventry and Stoke, that's 2 massive wins, all things considered, against 2 very good sides. So I know we mentioned Stoke struggles, but that is a team that has occupied an automatic promotion spot after 10 games in the season. So I think any team that beats Coventry 3-0 is going to be favoured a lot in the next few games, and I think I'm going to do that with Ipswich here. it'll be a turn. But as you said, with the King Power atmosphere, it's certainly a dodgy one for Leicester when they start slowly. Even in that game against Sheffield United, it was just not a good way to start the game, and it doesn't help when the fans pile onto it. So, I think they need to bounce back and keep this form going for Leicester. It's more for Cifuentes more than them really to keep his job intact. But I personally can't see it against an Ipswich side this good, Lewis.
Yeah, and I think one duel in particular, I think, because Leicester do have difficulties at the back, but not incredibly defensively. Luke Thomas at left back, it just seems like, obviously going forward, he's a threat and he can carry the ball and he can create chances. But I feel like whoever's playing on Ipswich's right side is definitely going to be very aware that he's definitely want the target, whether it's Jaden Philogene shifting over to the right or it's, someone else, maybe Jack Clark coming on and, running at him. I feel like that's going to be a really important duel and one that Ipswich could potentially exploit. I think Ipswich, similar with a lot of sides, you don't know which team's going to turn up. We've had the odd surprise result where things have gone against them recently, but I'll be surprised to see Leicester pick up a win here.
Yeah, as you said, there's so much quality in this Ipswich team. We were sort of saying all season when they were struggling, why are they struggling? There's so many good players in this team, and now you're finally sort of seeing what we were on about in the first couple of weeks with Philogene especially has been superb for Ipswich. He's been the sort of catalyst in their turnaround in form. But yeah, look, I think Cifuentes is probably safe to the new year, as I said, barring a catastrophic failure, but I can't see him. If they get this, then fair enough. This will be a huge result for him and this team to sort of spur them on, because again, it's a team that we associate with, dominating this division when they come down into it. I mean, this team just 9 years ago won the Premier League. That's the pedigree of Leicester City. So, they need to pick up form because this isn't a team who should be a mid-table Championship side anymore. This is a team that was considered, after that Premier League win, as one of the, newer members, potentially of the Big Six, moving their way into there at one point. So, you cannot let a Leicester side like this suffer away in the Championship. They've got to turn it around. This would be a huge opportunity to go and do so. Against Ipswich, final game that we will be sort of reviewing today will be Portsmouth versus Blackburn Rovers. Now, obviously, this is two teams that we've sort of mentioned with their struggles in recent weeks. Blackburn more with their pitch being able to play on it than actually the results on the field. But Blackburn, obviously, no wins in the last 5, I want to say, or 4, sorry. They've obviously 5 if you count the disastrous postponement against Sheffield Wednesday. And a Portsmouth side, as we mentioned, have had their struggles, especially in front of goal. Both these teams are 22nd and 20th. So an opportunity for Portsmouth to close the gap to the teams above them, Lewis. But obviously for Blackburn, their chance to get out of trouble and fast, especially, playing the team that, are the team to sort of cross to get into that relegation zone.
Yeah, Blackburn have been a really weird one this season. There's been obviously a lot of teams that have had, differing form, but you just can't really pinpoint Blackburn on the table. I feel like they go on these incredible streaks where we saw them, beat Southampton, Leicester, Bristol City in a row, pick up a surprise win against Preston as well. And yeah, recent games they've had an informed QPR side that they've fell to defeat to. They picked up a draw against Ipswich, but when a draw against Oxford, I feel like it's a bit of a weird one. They've not managed to pick up too many points, but I think the performances have been there. And they're just, I think they seem to be doing, we're able to grind out results every once in a while. And I think that's something that really holds them in good stead against Portsmouth, who just, in contrast, just haven't really had that about them. I feel like in front of goal, we've mentioned that they've struggled. Colby Bishop has not been brilliant. Connor Chaplin as well, we mentioned him before. I think Blackburn really need a result here after 4 games without a win, but I feel like I'd put my money on them if I was a betting man.
Yeah. I mean, Blackburn's weird because I said they haven't won any of the last 4, but they've only lost one of them. They've drawn every other game 1-1. So if you want a score prediction for this one, then I might lean towards a 1-1 again. But yeah, I don't know. I think with Pompey, as you said, they just don't score goals. And, in this division that's pivotal. I think my other big gripe with Portsmouth, and it was their biggest sort of credit last year, Fratton Park. This is what kept them in the division last year. 11 points from 10 games at Fratton Park. Only Oxford, Blackburn, Norwich, and obviously Sheffield Wednesday have a worse record at their respective home grounds. As we said, an absolute fortress in the first season they were in this league. Nowadays, obviously they're bottom in the league in away form, which they were last year as well for a very large period of time. So, they have to reignite that fire at Fratton Park, that sort of ability at Fratton Park, because this was their biggest credit. This is how they stayed in the league last year, was by basically just winning every game at home, and then the away form doesn't matter because you pick up sort of 40 odd points from your home games, and then you're fine. So look, they need to fix that. They need to start scoring goals. That's the biggest thing I can give Portsmouth. Is I think if you're looking in January, I think you look to sign a goal scorer. As much as Bishop has his credits, Chaplin has his credits, they aren't scoring goals. Not enough at a level anyway to keep his team in this division. So you need to find someone who will put the ball in the back of the net and quickly. I think Messina's got to adapt. His pressing style is intense, but doesn't always relate to chances by pressing. And I think that's got to change as well. But as you said, I guess the Blackburn side, they're tough to beat as much as they don't win a lot. I think they're going to struggle here. But they, with Fratton Park, if they can find that form they found last year, then they could easily get a win here.
I think, like you mentioned, Portsmouth's poor home form. It's only right to reflect on Blackburn on the travels, and they're currently third if you're taking away games only, behind Coventry and Middlesbrough, of course. And that's with playing 2 games on the road fewer as well.
That's ridiculous. I did not realise they were third in the league.
Yeah, very, very good away from home. I feel it just feels nice to go out and play a game of football where it's not, you're not getting trench foot or something on the surface. So
pitches away from home anyway.
Oh yeah, definitely. But Blackburn a scary outfit. I know that when they played Hull towards the start of the season, Blackburn went into it in absolutely dire form, and they looked like a side that had been completely transformed overnight. Todd Cantwell was absolutely running the game, and they look like a top Championship side compared to Hull, who just couldn't really handle them. And that's the nature of this Blackburn side. You just don't know which team's going to turn up. And you mentioned obviously winless in 4, but if I had to tell you that they've got 10 points in 4 recent away games, completely changed the narrative. I feel like Blackburn could be, licking the lips ahead of this game.
I cannot believe they are third in the league on away form. That's unbelievable. I suppose it helps when you're not playing on a waterlogged surface every week. It's supposed to be better off. The games actually get finished for a start. Wow, fair play. Yeah, no, that's a big factor in this game. I think, as you said, if you're looking at last year, it's hard to back any team at Portsmouth because of how good they were. But this year, you back a lot of teams against Portsmouth at Fratton because they just can't find that form. I think it contributes to the league being a lot stronger this year than it was last year, in my opinion, especially with the teams coming up from League One. It's one of the strongest 3 we've ever seen, or at least for a very, very long time, as far as 3 teams all competing, in that top half of the table, more or less. Obviously, Wrexham just below. But you don't see that very often. Obviously, Charlton have had their sort of falls off in recent, but they've been in the playoffs this year. So it's hard for a team like Portsmouth. We sort of categorised them and Oxford as a team in trouble this year, and it's sort of come to fruition so far this season. So they need a turnaround. As you said, though, with Blackburn in the form that they are away from home, I struggle to back the Portsmouth here with no goals in the last 3 games. No, as you said with Bishop, he didn't even start against us in that game. Obviously, their top scorer this season is, I believe it's Segicic with 4. You can't rely on these sort of players to score goals. Colby Bishop has 1 goal. Callum Lang has no goals. Connor Chaplin has no goals. That's bad. That's really shocking. That's really, really tough to look at that and see that your 3 sort of strikers, if you will, see Chaplin playing more in the 10, sort of off the striker, to have 1 goal between the 3 of them is sort of needs alarm bells ringing, and quickly at Portsmouth to change that.
Yeah, I think... it's going to be a difficult day in the office for Portsmouth. I think Blackburn come away with a win here. I don't think Portsmouth have really got enough about them at Championship level. I mentioned the second season syndrome before, and I think, their bubble has been burst recently, and their poor form just really speaks volumes.
Yeah. Right, but that is all we have for you for our predictions for and sort of review for this week's action. I'll ask you one question before we go, Lewis. Obviously, we're sort of midway through the season now. We're getting there towards the Christmas period. If you had to guess, as we've spoken about sort of struggling teams a lot this episode, your bottom three come the end of the season, who do you think it will be?
Bloody hell. I think Sheffield Wednesday, I think they're a bit of a given now. It's probably safe to say. I can see Charlton getting pulled into there as well. And also, it's between Portsmouth and Oxford. I'm going to go Portsmouth as well. So Charlton, Portsmouth, Sheffield Wednesday.
Okay. Charlton's an interesting shout. I'm going to go, obviously, as you said, Sheffield Wednesday is more or less guaranteed. I think, it's getting close to that point where they'll be officially relegated at some point in this sort of January, February time. I'm going to go Portsmouth and Oxford. I think Charlton have too much quality in the team. And, with Nathan Jones, they'll come back from this result, I think. Norwich are an interesting one as well, because as much as everyone says they will get out, they're still losing these games. So they've got to sort of click in and fast. I think they'll be okay. So for me, I'm going to go Sheffield Wednesday. I'll go Portsmouth 23rd and I'll go Oxford 22nd. I think teams like Blackburn, Charlton and Norwich will be just on the sort of brink of being the teams in trouble. But now that is all we have for you for this week. So thank you very much to Lewis for joining me as always. And we will see you all for our review episode next week.